Good morning! This is Bill from Curious Cars and Auto House of Naples on what's another muggy, shitty, awful Florida morning. Again, with the weather report, I'm not going to delve too deep into it. I've done it a lot over the last couple of months because of the incredible, shitty, horrible Florida weather that we do get in the mornings, the mid-mornings, noontime, the afternoon, and evening. So I've already exhausted that topic ad nauseum, I understand, and I won't keep going. But just rest assured that it sucks. I'm dripping, the glasses are fogged up, and everything is as crappy as it could be on a very traditional Florida. Look, that said, it is September. It's now, I believe, September 2, if I have my dates correct. And that is one of the BER months, the BER months. And that means that October is right around the corner because, after I turned 25, I think that, age 25 through age 35 lasted about 8.6 seconds. 35 through 45 lasted about 12.2. And now here I am creeping up on the wrong side of 50, and damn do I feel old. But that said, the next month, October, is right around the corner, and with October comes the hope of better weather. I mean, we have had some hot Halloweens, and probably with my luck we'll have the same this year, but at least there's hope. This is the point where there's hope, and that matters. So anyone who's followed these videos for a while knows that by the time November rolls around, the mood of the video becomes much more chipper, and I'm actually quite optimistic and positive. They could probably let me around sales guys at that point. Instead of sending me away to an office that keeps me segregated from them, which honestly I really can't blame them for. The last thing you need are really negative, depressed sales guys looking around for a straight razor to end it all, and that is how it ends up with me after a few minutes of talking, so I can't really blame them for segregating me that way. And anyway, look, we're just going to leap directly into this car. The hell with all the reports. I'm not even going to get into the animals, the birds. Everything's quiet. There weren't any deer on the street this morning. None of those little carnivorous bastards. The goats are long gone. I don't know where the hell they are. I even wandered around the property looking for them, but they're gone. Peter either had them cooked or quartered or, whatnot, or maybe he gave them to a nice home. They went to Goatville, where they're living with a bunch of other happy goats somewhere. And if you believe that, yeah, that's the way it goes. 1996 Pontiac Firebird Formula. The Formula has a very, very dear and near place to my heart because my first car was a 79 Pontiac Formula Firebird. And let me tell you, back in the day, that meant an absolute, it meant an absolute ton to me. Although this gen, it kind of missed me a little bit, which I'll get into. But this is a fourth generation F-body. It's a pony car, if you will, sometimes and actually often a muscle car from GM and from the now defunct Pontiac. As you know, Pontiac went they went belly up basically in 2010. GM decided to kill him. If Pontiac had been popular in China, they'd still be around today, but as it turns out, the Chinese were more interested in Buicks. I guess Sun Yat-sen drove a Buick at some point, maybe Ho Chi Minh, who knows, but Buicks were much more popular over there, and that's why they still exist, while Pontiac has been discarded to the ash heap of history. This one is a Formula. And the Formula is kind of the redheaded stepchild to the Trans Am. There's a lot of famous Trans Ams out there. Smokey and the Bandit, obviously, probably the most famous of them. You've got Kit from Knight Rider, the Knight Industries 2000. That was another car of my youth, by the way, which, I don't care. You could beat the crap out of that thing with its 305 or whatever. I don't care. I love that car. But, probably my favorite Trans Am from the movies, a bit of a sleeper, is from McHugh, a 1974 Brewster Green, which was a one-year-only color Trans Am in a John Wayne movie called McHugh, which was kind of fascinating to me, and a terrific car. And of course, there were a million other Trans Ams in TV and the movies, but very, very few Formulas. The Formulas just got the shaft. In fact, the only honorable mention I can think of is American American Beauty when, what's his name, that creepy guy, oh, I forget his name, Kaiser Sose, when Kaiser Sose got a 1970 Formula Firebird, but when he told his wife what he got, he called it a 1970 Firebird. He didn't even reference the formula part. Which is just par for the course with these things. So formulas just have never had the same panache as the Trans Am, which I think is not entirely fair because they have a very good reason for existing. The first formula came out in 1970 as an option package on the Firebird. It missed the first gen altogether. It replaced the Firebird 400 actually. And what the formula was a more subtle, you know, you've got the Trans Am with all your screaming chickens and your vents and your spoilers and your crazy shit. The formula gave you all of the mechanicals that the Trans Am had. You know, the big motors, the beefed up trannies, the beefed up transmissions, the better brakes and suspension and whatnot, but it took away some of the ostentatious crap that you got on the Trans Am, which obviously I do love all that ostentatious crap, but there is something to be said for a more subtle version, and the formula was directed at a more mature and older enthusiast buyer starting in 1970. And of course I ended up with the 79. They were mostly distinguished by the twin intake scoops on the hood, which was a pretty beautiful hood, particularly back in 1970. It got somewhat muted by the time my 79 rolled around, which was a shame. The 70 hood was absolutely gorgeous. But that was it. You didn't get the side vents, the scoops on the side of the fenders. You didn't get the front and rear lip and bottom edge spoilers, and the spoiler at the back, which was of course good looking, was just an option. That was not an option on a TA. But you know, when people found out, when racers found out that the formula gave you all that stuff and was lighter than the Trans Am, it instantly did gain some street and race credibility. So there is something to be said for that. But as far as TV and the movies go, I remember a weird one from The Highlander, if you remember that movie, which what's his name? The French guy in Talladega Nights said was shit. He was probably right. It probably was shit. But I watched that movie as a kid, too. That had a Trans Am in it, and it had a Formula hood with a cutout for the shaker scoop, which was quite incorrect and fascinating to me. The only time a Formula has had the shaker hood scoop was in the very, very limited production SD 455 models, which you could get in, 73 and 74 only. There are a handful made, and we reviewed one of them. Uncle Johnny has one. I don't even know if he knows how much that thing is worth. I mean, that formula is probably worth more than a correlating Trans Am, just based on rarity. It has the TA shaker hood, not the formula hood, but none of the other stuff that goes along with the Trans Am. But anyway, look, I digress. So that was the second gen, which I'm in love with. Third gen, it didn't appear. Third gen came out in 82, ran through 86 without a formula. Then in 87, a formula did appear, if you remember those cars. They could also be got with mostly you could get them with the TPI, the tune port injection. But I looked at a formula a few months ago that actually had a 305 with a throttle body in it. So, God. Anyway, that thing, I believe it probably came out to compete with the LX Mustang, which was very popular at the time. And, it was basically the same concept. You've got all of the Mustang GT running gear in a much less ostentatious package with a lower sticker price. So that is surely why the formula came out at that point. But in 1993, when these cars debuted, the fourth generation, the formula came in right out of the bat. It was instantly there. It was already an option package. And, there it was. That said, look, I talk about the Mustang, and the LX and the way the formula competed with it. That is historical. I mean, the Mustang came out in 64 and a half, as we all know. It was the brainchild of Lee Iacocca. And GM, of course, was instantly jealous of the success, but it took them a while to respond to it. And they came out with the F-body, which is, of course, the first-gen Camaro Firebird, as you will. And it competed quite well. But John Z. DeLorean, you know, all these names come up a lot in the videos, Iacocca and DeLorean. DeLorean was running Pontiac at that time. He was riding high on the success of the GTO. He was developing a car called the Banshee, which was a two-seat, really high-end sports car that he wanted to build to compete with the Mustang. But GM brass said, no, look, absolutely not. This thing's just going to cut into our Corvette sales. It's not competing with anyone but Corvette. So no, you can't have it. And DeLorean was instead given the F-body to come up with the Firebird, which it was a consolation prize, which he took and he did something with. You know, he made a, you know, back in those days, the GM definitely had more uniqueness to them in terms of their divisions. They had different, you know, Pontiac guys were Pontiac guys, and the Pontiac guys building them made them for the Pontiac guys. The badge engineering wasn't quite as vicious. So even though the 67 Firebird and Camaro shared basically the same platform, they were still very different cars in terms of body styling and engine choices and whatnot. So yeah, DeLorean did a very good job with the Firebird. It was maybe meant to compete as much with the Cougar as which the Mustang, you know, more of an upscale Camaro. And it certainly did very well and sold well. So the historical competition with Ford is, yeah, you know, it's a pretty big deal. The second and third gen are the cars of my youth. They're the ones that I zeroed in on. I have to admit that I kind of, and we got flies. God, I hate flies. Anyway, they were more the cars of my youth, not just because I owned a second gen as a first car, but it was just that era for me. So that was my era. The F by the second gen, the third gen. I lusted after IROC Zs and GTAs. These were cars that meant a lot to me. But by the time this car rolled around in '93, my tastes had moved on, and I had become less of a kid boy racer. And now I wanted big American. I bought a Riviera, an '85 Riviera that I still love to this day. I wish I could find one similar to it, but I never will. That thing was just special. And I also was getting back into European cars at the time. So the F-bodies went off my radar. I mean, I was aware they existed. I knew about them, obviously. I followed them to some extent because I was a car magazine reader. But it wasn't a car that I absolutely lusted after. But when this came out in '93, this redesign, it was long, long overdue. I mean, the third gen had come out in '82, so it ran for 10 years, which is, you know, pretty good long time. Not for a Mercedes, but for a Firebird or Camaro or GM product, certainly. And it was a little bit of a revelation. I mean, it used that same aero look that was coming in the '90s, where everything sort of resembled a really swoopy bar of soap. Gone were all the creases and hard edges that you got on the prior gen, which I prefer, to be quite honest. But they did make an extremely handsome car. And I do think the Firebird is better looking than the Camaro, which of course it shares virtually everything underneath the skin. But the Firebird has this much more pronounced rear end spoiler. You can see that there. With the Camaro, it was kind of built more into the bodywork. And then for me, pop-up headlights, which I demonstrated at the beginning of the video. That is a big improvement over the four squares that the Camaro had. And I think this is a much more sinister and cool-looking front end than you found on the Camaro. So personally, I think the Firebird had the better looks. I don't know if that held true in sales. I'm sure the Camaro beat it. But I think the Firebird was just the better-looking car. It was heavily influenced by a concept car called the Banshee 4 that came out in the mid-1980s. That was a design, it was a study in aerodynamics and technology and that sort of thing. And I think it also proved that Pontiac was still pretty sore over the whole Banshee thing. You know, they're still making Banshee show cars and concept cars, which may have been a little bit of a middle finger to GM. But this car does look quite a bit like that car. I mean, obviously not quite as radical, but it was obviously very heavily influenced by it, and obviously very much generated inside a wind tunnel to be slippery. And, you know, it's got a raked windshield and a sloped back, and, you know, it still retains the formula thing. You've got the two scoops in the front, which I think are quite nice, and more scoops on the front bumper. You know, I'm appreciating this car and the looks of this car more and more as time goes on. For a short while, it just looked like something, you know, single moms drove to their jobs. It didn't have the panache of the first or second or third gens, but I'm starting to change my tune on that. They're starting to look a little bit better to me, and obviously I'm not alone, because they've really started to come up on the collector market. Honestly, they were quite a bargain for a long time, and now not so much. Now they're getting to be expensive. But anyway, you could get a V6 or two V8 models in '93. When it came out, and the V6 wasn't that bad, mind you, and you could also get some performance options on it. That was rare and new, but the Formula and the TA were 8s. There was also a Firehawk model, which is quite rare and interesting to collectors now, and in fact the Firehawk continued all the way, you know, SLP, you know, I guess street something perform. God, you know, I tell you, it's just the whiskey and the pills. They don't help me get smarter, and they're probably what leads to some of the sweating as well, by the way. But anyway, they had pace car editions and this edition, that edition. But essentially, there were three cars: the base Firebird with the V6, the Formula with the V8, and the more option Trans Am, also with the V8. It was an LT1 right out of the bat, which was an improvement over the tune port that came out in earlier cars, and was directly out of the Corvette with no difference at all. I mean, virtually the same exact engine that was in the same year C4 Corvette. Ditto the transmission and whatnot. The only difference is it was a little more restricted with the exhaust and the intake, so it was down on horsepower from the Corvette, but of course a little bit of tuning could correct that. So initially 275 horse and a little bit more, I want to say like 290 on the torque. In 96, which is what this car is, that did get bumped up a little bit. They made the exhaust better. It went to a twin cat dual exhaust system, which improved the horsepower. It got up to 285. You could also get the WS6 Ram Air option, which would bump it up to 305 and made it a little bit more potent in terms of engine and also some suspension options. The hood on that was actually quite cool. One wonders if there wasn't some sort of a, you know, the first Ram Air option was in '69. Now you have 96 with another Ram Air option. So they sort of crisscrossed the integers on that one, and the 96 brought back some of the stuff that made the 69 so cool. But anyway, it was up on horsepower and became a better car. And then a few years later, the LS motor came out in it, which was another improvement and really did bump the tunability of this car. Now you have this aluminum Corvette-based LS V8 that you could tune to, you know, all the horsepower you could ever want. So the cars just did keep getting better and better, and I think they're pretty great cars overall. So I tell you what, I'm going to pause there for a minute, dry myself off, and then we're going to get into the particulars of this particular car. Alright, so as I said before, the styling of this car has grown on me considerably over the years. I like the taillight treatment. It retained some of the grid pattern that you got on the later GTAs and Trans Ams of the 1990s and the 1980s. I think that looks great. I like the 4 quad pipes coming out the bottom. They look really nice and sinister. The little bumperettes, the way the bumper is blended in, that sloping rear window that became an F-body thing. You know, the wheels are fine. You can see it's got rear discs, nice, anti-lock brakes. Like the Formula V8 badging on the side, otherwise breaks up what would look kind of bland or like a, you know, standard V6 Firebird. The mirrors are a little bit aero and overworked in my opinion, but you know, maybe they're fine. But I would prefer something a little bit more subtle. The front end, I think, quite cool. The Firebird logo on the front, the twin scoops in the front of the bumper, the twin scoops on the hood, the pop-up lamps, nice. These are bizarre. It has, you know, and I'm sure this is a wind tunnel thing and an aerodynamic thing, but it has singularly the most bizarre wiper arms that I may have ever seen on a vehicle. I mean, look at the size of this ridiculous big thing. Very, very, very strange to me, but again, probably part of the wind tunnel testing. The sloped windshield, nice, and everything very cool. So anyway, let's have a look inside the trunk. Oh, let's get that guy in there, give this a pop, see what we got. Oh, good. At least the struts are working well. So everything looking very nice back here. This is a super low mile. I want to say 39,000 mile locally owned example. And it's nice to find one of these cars in this shape because usually they're a lot more beat up and they've been through a lot more vicious ownership than this one has. But, you know, you've got this flap up cargo cover, which it's kind of worthless. You've got a deep little trunk here, which is good for shopping bags. You can see you got some, probably some 6x9s. If they're not, they should be there in the back. And the cargo area is decent. You can also run forward that rear seat. That does have a, you have to do it both at different, yeah, that's ridiculous. It should have one release for both sides. How the hell are you supposed to grow 3 arms? Or you have to be plastic band to lower that, but anyway, whatever. So that back seat can be folded down for additional cargo, which does make it quite useful. But otherwise, under that compartment there, you've got the spare tire jacking hardware. I checked that yesterday, so I'm not going to pull it off now. But it's all very nice and proper. Have a look under the hood. And look, you know, I know a lot of people yearned for the days of the 60s with the what was considered muscle cars, but this car frankly outperformed most of them. I mean, it had more true horsepower, it had a limited slip rear end, disc brakes with anti-lock, better handling suspension. I mean, it was just a better car, as it should be. I mean, it came out, I don't know, what, 30 years later, you know, almost. So, I mean, definitely advancements have taken hold. So, and of course, it stayed true to the performance for the masses formula, which is, no pun intended, but which is, you know, a kind of a cheap sticker price, which it had, and plenty of power, plenty of pep, a decent handling suspension, and lots of performance for the masses. So, you can't really argue with General Motors. They stayed true to what they wanted to be, and it did work in this car. So here it is. Here's the LT1 directly out of the Corvette, 285 horsepower in this incarnation. Has the automatic, this car, the 460 LE or whatever the hell it is, LE 460, L460E, what? Yeah, it doesn't matter. Could also have had the T56 6-speed, which probably would have been better, but and what are you going to do? And it worked fine. So you've got 285. If it had the Ram Air option, you would have had 305. And it performed very adequately. It took it to the Mustang at the time. It took it to the Camaro and did great. It had double control arm suspension up front. Nice. Very, very proper. With, you know, and a live axle in the back, which essentially means a solid rear axle. But it was pretty well sorted, you know, on, you know, riding on arms, and the car handled well for not having this sort of advanced four-wheel independent suspension, and shit like that is what did keep the sticker price low as well. So, you know, you can cry about it, but it's also the right formula to be doing donuts in the Walmart parking lot at 2 in the morning, and there ain't a damn thing wrong with that. So, anyway, there it is under the hood. This one, again, the Corvette 5.7 LT1 engine, has the Opti Spark, which was updated by 96, so it wasn't quite as troubling as the earlier versions, and was a pretty damn good motor. A great improvement over the tune port, and a good development for the push rod that then was improved upon by the LS that came out later on. So everything looking nice and well in this 39,000 mile car, and the strut still keeping the hood up. So I tell you what, I know this is a short little snippet, but I'm going to get all my crap inside the car, so when we hop in and I show you the interior, we can just go, and I could get to work and I can get ready for Sebring this weekend, which, you know, I'm 50-50 on, because my nitwit friends, they've decided that insurance adjusting is the path to riches. So they've all become insurance adjusters, and they're flying off to, they're driving off in shitbox motorhomes to New Orleans to do some insurance adjusting, where I'm sure they're going to have a miserable time, and we'll see. So anyway, they're not going to Sebring, which leaves me with Robert the Polak, who's, you know, he's a friend of mine, and he's a total asshole. He's a mean-spirited son of a bitch. Good friend of mine, who the last time we were at the race, when I was walking to my trailer, he drove his big stupid diesel truck up to me, did a hole shot, and covered me with diesel soot and dirt. And I grabbed my 357 out of the car, out of my truck actually, walked over to his truck, aimed it at his rear tire, and I'm sitting there sweating, holding this big 357 nickel-plated Smith & Wesson thing, and you know, do I want to get banned from the SCCA? That was what was going through my mind. I really want to shoot out his tires, but do I want to get banned from the SCCA? And at the end of I pussied out. I didn't shoot the tires, but God damn it, I should have, because it would have been a great story, and frankly, Robert deserved it. But anyway, I digress. So let me pause. I'll get my shit in the back of the car, and then we're going to go for a spin. All right, so let's just keep going. Real quick, one of the biggest complaints about these cars is the interiors and the quality and that sort of thing. Most interesting to me, and we'll get this right now, is you see this big hump in the floor of the passenger side, which is quite strange. Look at this thing. I mean, it's like a ski slope. It's so pronounced. That was originally put in the 93s to fit the catalytic converter. Well, by the time the 96 came out, the design had changed and it no longer needed it. But of course, it would have been expensive for GM to upgrade or change the floor stamping, so they didn't. They just left the floor stamping the same. So that hump, which was required on the 93 to 95 models, is no longer needed, but it's still there, and of course that's yeah, that's sort of part of the reason people cry about these things. So anyway, let's get over into the other side and see what we got. Get the keys out. I like the flush handles, actually. Very nice. Let's hop in, fire it up. It's got one of these GM passkey things. You see the little chip in there. Hopefully it recognizes that. There's that LT1 firing to life. Can't really resist giving it a little bit of a rev. This then, I'm going to turn the air on as well because it is hot as balls today. Let's get a little max AC going. There we go. But anyway, there you see a very nicely laid out instrument cluster. Now, the cheapness of the interior, yeah, you know, it's a thing. I mean, it's real plastic, fantastic. It's real 80s or 90s stuff, I should say. You know, this was not the pinnacle of GM engineering by any stretch. And it shows in the interior of this car. But that said, it's also laid out in such a way that it makes it very fun to drive. And that was the purpose of this car, was again, performance for the masses, and frankly, driving excitement, as they said in the commercials. And I think it delivered. That's what happens when you don't clear your memory card and run out of space. But anyway, there it is. You've got your light switch over here for the pop-up headlights. All very nice stuff. You've got a very proper instrument cluster. You've got a 5700 RPM tach looking at you. You got your water temp, you got your oil pressure, you've got your voltmeter, your fuel, 155 mile an hour speedo, tach. There you see just 39,000 miles on the clock of this thing, and that's cool. That makes this thing rare because a lot of these got beat to shit. You got these good 3 vents here. I actually like the way they work. They're not the fanciest things in the world in terms of build quality, but they're very functional. You can very easily steer them where you want them, and I think that's good stuff. You've got an in-CD player with the optional equalizer. Look, man, if you get in my car, don't fuck with the equalizer, please. I appreciate that. What makes you think you're qualified to adjust? What are you, a sound engineer? You know, I may have spent days getting this thing tuned in correctly. Some of these nitwits would hop in your cars and start, we need more, the 100 hertz. Yeah, stop it. Just shut the fuck up and don't touch anything. But anyway, there it is, in-CD, very traditional dial style climate control. This is the kind of shit that's cheap. I mean, there's no question about it. Look at this ashtray. I mean, this is just GM junk, but it's fine. And this one is not a smoker's car. I don't believe it is. Somebody's lit a cigarette off that. Good. So it is properly being used as a Trans Am or Firebird. But anyway, there's your shifter. You got a nice little place to put crap here. You got a singular cup holder here, and then in that area back there you could fit some kind of a 9mm big long, because that's sloping windshield. You got this giant dash top, so if you were a cop you could fit a lot of donuts up there. You got map lights inside of the rear view mirror, all very nice, dims manually. Over here in the glove box, which is also cheap, you've got, this guy was nuts, man. You got your Pontiac owner's manual, your insurance cards. I want to find this thing. This is the guy who owned this, because he was a lunatic. Look at this. He recorded his fuel mileage. I mean, who even buys this car for fuel mileage? He's got like where he got the gas, the date, what gas he's using. We've got Sunoco, you've got BP. This is obviously a guy who probably has a human foot collection somewhere. So maybe a guy you want to get a car from, but you definitely don't want to go to dinner with him. Anyway, you've got dual airbags, you've got big bars in the side doors to prevent collision. This one's got leather, which feels nice and supple, and good supportive seats. They look like the seats from the Series 2 model, which is great. I brought my CD collection from the Datsun. So in fact, if there's one thing that you got to play when you're inside a Camaro Firebird, to me that's going to be a Black Sabbath CD. So let's get that out and see if this thing even works. It's showing CD. We're looking good so far. Track 1. We got some controls here. So we got Black Sabbath. I'm going to turn it off because instantly the copyright thing comes in and they'll demonetize the video and I won't be able to afford to go to Sebring this weekend. But yeah, that's cool shit. So let's do it. Let's go for a spin. Should we do a little burnout in Peter's driveway? Let me turn the air off. Let me get a little bit of power braking going. Oh, I'm sorry, Peter. I hope you're not off enjoying yourself with Tinderellas in Europe while I'm here slogging away in the miserable heat. I really do. I hope not. I hope... Anyway, there's the gates opening. So look, what I'm going to do, I'm going to wait, because Dalton's windshield is going to be shit, even though it's cloudy. So I'm just going to pick it up again at the end of the street. All right, so I've got the... I had the heat on, actually. I didn't realize, why is the AC in lava? Well, I had the heat on for the defrost again. And, yeah, there you go. I've got the window down, which I don't think is going to help too much, because... I had a pretty good second. Because it's all factory, this car. It's, most of the guys who bought these things would have put exhaust on it, turbo mufflers, whatnot. They'd sound vicious. Let me put that back up. And terrific. This one, not so much. You've got all the factory Cadillac mufflers on here, so it's awful quiet, but you get the point. If you want to tune the thing, it's in a nice virgin state where you'll be able to do so. But here's the thing with this car, and I'm not going to start expounding and rambling on and on and on. I'm only going to say this. This is cheap performance for the masses. V8 up front, rear drive, good brakes, donuts in the parking lot kind of stuff. You can hammer it, has a nice kick down. Yeah, I'm driving like an asshole this morning, but the hell with it. I mean, these cars kind of do encourage that. It's why I had to get rid of my old Firebird. I wouldn't have had a license. But you've got plenty of torque. You've got great V8 power. I like the seating position in this thing. It's kind of low and sloped. It feels pretty good. Oh, he's going in the middle. It's a lot of fun for not too much money, and that's been the formula no pun intended, of these V8 F-bodies since their inception. So all very, very cool stuff. This one is going to be for sale. If you have an interest, it's going to be at Auto House of Naples on the web at autohousenaples.com, or you could give him a call. We've got a great snowflake sales guy now. He's a nice kid. He really is. He's doing better than I thought he would. He's a decent kid. 239-263-8500. And again, this is a 96 Formula Firebird, LT1 powered, 39,000 miles. And it has been babied since new, which you can certainly feel in the driving. Yeah, great. If you have an interest, give them a call and look on the web. We appreciate it. We got more fun stuff coming up. I still do have that Cordoba. I promise it's coming. It's just been that hard to get stuff ready. And I will do a review on my new diesel Silverado, new to me, you know, at some point. And look, man, I promise it's coming. You can't stop making together. The Silverado is coming, the Cordoba is coming, and we might have some other fun stuff too. So thank you very much for having a look. We appreciate it, and I will see you with the next one. Take care.